Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Cutter Degrassiism and poll video. Today is the top 12 worst plot lines for a character. Now, it's not the worst plot lines ever, as in the fact that one character could have multiples. It was based off of a Degrassi thing that I actually found that was made by Spin Mason, who was who has a lot of redditors and all that. But the fact is that Spin Mason months ago, before the start of 2024, said that a worst plotline for a character, and people would actually like put down them, and then Spin Mason would have an infographic that would have a character, certain character, and with things on it that they determined the worst plotline per character. I kind of followed that along in a decent way, but then all of a sudden, what ended up happening was that they did the radish one, and then it intrigued me. It piqued my interest, and then of course it had the infographic about the characters and all that. So I decided to write down characters and their worst plot lines that the people voted for, and do polls, like things like that. But the fact of the matter is that the way it was that basically I decided to do like characters and all that. I got to 38, and then I added two characters that did not get them. So I had 40, so I decided to do 8 polls of 5, and then would have whoever won the poll would be in a top 10, and then basically the runners up would have a fight to be 9th and 10th. What happens is that you'll see in the first poll thing you see, like the picture at the end of this video, will be practically that the one that I did that to make good, because there was 8, but there was actually a tie in one of them to make 9. And then I decided to say who's number 10. What happened was there was a tie for 9th. So for 10th. So I'm like, do I do a top 11? But I'm like, let's make it even. And then the third place person in that poll actually qualified too. So I decided to make it top 12 instead of a top 10. Now, of course, one of the biggest honorable mentions is Radish's plotline. Worst plotline was letting Rick back in the school. I agree with that in a sense, but also it should be the whole Rick situation in general. Because not only did he screw up with letting Rick back at the school and turning a blind eye to the violence towards Rick, but the fact of the matter is that despite him wanting answers for who would paint as paint and feather Rick during Whack Your Brain, he never got the answers. Raj never seemed to want to go after the people and all that. And he was supposed to have a talk with Spinner about it. And he didn't follow up on it. Like, fuck. That's just pathetic. And then, of course, he decides to make Degrassi cancel their thing of Dracula and put on a cheering musical for how good Degrassi is. Like, I understand him and the PR move and everything, but he just basically put himself in front of the students, and Liberty and JT took him to task. He overreacts by throwing them in detention, but he's soon turfed the next day, saying that he's been reassigned. I think it's a fancy way of being fired. Or that, but like the school board probably screwed up and we're just making Raj a scapegoat. I think Raj was a scapegoat in a sense. But that's all right. So it's time for top 12 time. Now, I did 2 polls of 6, of course, but what I did differently is I determined what 1 to 6 and 7 to 12 were based off of how bad the plot line is. Now, I'm going to say this before we get started with the countdown, is that a character with a bad plot line, it is up to people's interpretations what it is. It's either the worst thing they have done on the show, or it was just basically a badly drawn in storyline. So here we go. Okay, so the first things I'm going to say is from 7 to 12. Of course, you'll see it at the end and all that. So let me make sure I can do fingers correctly. There we go. All right, so number 12 on the list is Anya's in the worst plot line, the Dr. Chris debacle. Now, of course, Anya was having relationship issues with Sav and wanted Sav to basically tell his parents, his Muslim parents, that, they were going out and they were a couple and all that. Anya said she would do the Quran, she would do whatever it took to make Sav's parents accept her, but they weren't really accepting of her. Added into the fact that Sav would rather be with his arranged bride more so than Anya. And Anya basically was just wanting a relationship. And that led to her Dr. Chris debacle. So the Dr. Chris debacle is that he was Anya's mom's gynecologist, and she took an interest in him. So she decided to lie about her age and said she was going to college and all that, because Anya was unsure about going to college in the first place. So she had to keep the facade up. Now, Dr. Chris was like 25 and all that, but still, Anya wanting to be with Dr. Chris is kind of weird, and it shows how much she was desperate for a relationship and all that. Fortunately, though, things don't really go too far and all that. Anya does admit her age and all that. And then Anya later on would join the military. It seems bad because, she's following orders and all that, because she was usually Holly J's lapdog, if you ask me. But, Anya at least took it upon herself to want to do something with her life. So there. Number 11 on the list is Darcy and her affection towards Snake in season 7. Now, this was one of the 3 from the runner-up from that poll for number 10, that there was a tie. So anyway, Darcy's affection towards Snake in season 7. Darcy could have been perceived as a goody-goody character with Christian values and basically weird stuff and all that. But Darcy, in a way, gets redemption by actually being the force behind Spinner trying to redeem himself from the whole season 4 debacle by season 5. That relationship was just doomed, all that, for Darcy and Spinner. But the fact of the matter is that Darcy in season 7 goes on a ski weekend with Peter and Manny, and then gets roofied by an unknown person. And then Darcy spirals out of control because she learns via Manny and all that, people were spiking drinks. And then, Darcy found herself on the couch and all that, and thought she was having sex with Peter. But no, it wasn't with Peter. It was with an unknown guy. Unfortunately for Darcy, that meant that she was actually kicked out of the friendship club, even though that she had sex and someone had molested her and lost her purity ring. However, Peter gave her one back. And, it was a good move by Peter and all that. Unfortunately, Darcy went into self-loathing. She actually tried to slit her wrists in the girls' bathroom and all that. The girls' locker room, under a shower and all that. But then she tries to talk to Snake because, Darcy is put under counseling with Sove, and of course doesn't talk about her rape and all that. And then she just wants Snake to listen. Darcy acts inappropriate. Snake draws a snake with boobs for Snake. And that was when Snake finally decides to go to Hatzalako's and Darcy's parents with all that information. And Darcy refuses to tell her parents, her mom, that she was raped and all that. She decides to tell people that Snake was inappropriate with her. In a sense, she has a point, but in the grand scheme of things, Anya basically tried to avoid having to admit her misdeeds because she had to be the perfect daughter for her mother. And, premarital sex was a big no-no. So she does that. Snake ends up getting investigated, kicked out until further notice. He does get cleared, mostly because Darcy does tell everyone the truth, that Snake was not inappropriate with her, and she didn't say she was raped. She just says that, Snake wasn't. I just was scared to tell people things. Snake cannot go back to school because they're still investigating him. Darcy is forced to go into Brad camp. Peter signs himself up for that too. And Darcy finally gets her justice, in a sense, with her unseen molester. So yeah, it was a terrible thing for Darcy to know that. And then of course season 8, early on, she goes to Kenya, and a lot of people thought bad things. Sinead Grimes was going to be part of the 90210 reboot. And the fact of the matter also is that, was Darcy forced to go to Kenya by her parents to atone for her mistakes, quote unquote? Probably. All right, so number 10 on the list. I know I didn't do the answer correctly. Number 10 with 8 votes in that 7 to 12 vote was JT being killed off in season 6. Now, it wasn't a bad storyline per se, but, killing off JT was just terrible. So the fact of the matter is that JT was this class clown and all that, but he grew up by season 5, mostly because Liberty was pregnant and JT wanted to do the right thing for the baby. Although his grandmother said, I'm not going to raise that kid, and I don't want you running out on your child like your dad ran out on you. And JT says, I will not be like my dad. And then, of course, Liberty says that, oh no, JT's grandmother is a lamb compared to my parents if they find out I'm pregnant. Of course, Liberty tries everything to hide the pregnancy and all that. JT quits his job as a kids on a kids show to be a pharmaceutical assistant and is coerced by Jay to sell OxyContin because people will sell their own mothers for a pill. And then all of a sudden, JT's in the drug trade with a trafficker and all that. He's worried because now he's being investigated. So he decides to overdose on purpose, but Jay saves him in a sense. And he wakes up in the hospital. Liberty decides to give up the baby. JT is saved from disaster by Liberty's lawyer dad, and they break off. And then season 6, JT starts dating Mia, who has a 2-year-old Isabella, and it's great and all that. But there are two parties that don't like it. Number one, Liberty, who is upset that JT is moving on so fast. But I mean, after all, JT would have proved himself to be a good father figure, and Liberty probably realized that, and she was a little bit jealous of JT. I mean, understandable. But the biggest party, number 2, is Lakehurst, who's upset over Mia being a former Lakehurst student dating a Degrassi student. So Lakehurst and Degrassi go into this major feud. Nick gets involved because he was Mia's ex before Lucas was there. And then, he wanted JT to pay dearly for dating Mia. So a couple of Lakehurst students crash a Degrassi party thrown at Spike and Snake's house. Well, Emma and Manny throw it for Liberty for her birthday. And they get booted out. But then JT, after realizing he wants to go after Liberty instead of Mia, I think in a way JT probably wanted to be with Liberty because he wanted this whole Lakehurst Degrassi feud to end and maybe they'll back off. So he does that. And then, he looks for her. JT looks for Liberty, and then those stupid boys, Drake Lampley, and I have to say the last name because the other Drake, and Johnny DeMarco were peeing on his car. JT makes a joke. You slay me with your humor. And then Drake Lampley, the redhead, comes in and stabs JT in the aorta. Johnny is shocked and all that. I think they wanted JT to pay dearly to get hurt, but not stabbed. So JT is bleeding. Liberty manages to find him and calls for help, but it's too little too late. And everyone is just upset and all that. Now, killing off JT was just terrible and all that. Now, years ago, the rumor was floating that Ryan Cooley himself, the actor who played JT, wanted to be killed off in gory fashion because he was going to college. However, last year he said in his statement that it was the Degrassi writers and the staff that were going to kill JT off. It wasn't Ryan's idea. So yeah, that's just pathetic. All right, so here we go. Number 9 on the list with number 9 is a tie. The poll had a tie for 8th. I am going with Caitlin from season 4 Next Gen at number 9. So Caitlin is number 9 for me. And the fact of the matter is about her presence. So Caitlin was one of those characters that came from the old Degrassi series into Next Gen and wanted to be with Joey, but there were issues with the relationship. But by season 4, Caitlin decides to buy Joey's house, which was up on the block. and to get together with Joey. And it seemed that Caitlin and Joey were meant to be with each other. I mean, many seasons of Degrassi, the old generation and the new generation, had that rhetoric. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, there were weirdness, and they made Caitlin look like a goof at times. But then Caitlin actually falls in love with Kevin Smith. Now, Kevin Smith, everyone knows about, is the big guy who did Clerks and a few other movies. Jay and Silent Bob, and then he comes in with his partner Jason Mewes to do Jay and Silent Bob do Go Canadian A, and they filmed the movie at Degrassi. Kind of a PR move by Degrassi because of the whole shooting thing. Maybe Hatzelackles may have had the PR issues too. But the fact of the matter is that Caitlin falls for Kevin Smith and breaks off the Caitlin and Joey relationship, which would have been great for old fans to actually be like, oh my gosh, they finally did it. And then all of a sudden, they're not there anymore. The worst part about everything was, it sent Joey on a downward spiral and Caitlin on a downward spiral too. She ends up being with Jesse, who was Ellie's boyfriend and all that at one time. Yeah, they turned Caitlin dirty. So the number 8 plot line is Miss O with Sav, the inappropriate relationship. I know I could have also had Paige with her relationship with Mr. Olander, but they didn't vote Paige for that storyline. The person voted Paige. The worst storyline was her being a diva in Degrassi Goes Hollywood and kind of being a character assassination, if you will. I agree with that, and that did not make the cut. That did not make the cut in those polls. But the fact of the matter is that, yeah, they tried the whole teacher-student relationship thing with O and Sav, and it just was bad. Kettlefish is like, what does Miss O see in Sav, and what does Sav see in Miss O? Because they both were terrible. And you know how Sav, the culture he was in. It just did not make sense. I didn't really watch Degrassi at that point in time, so logically, I don't know much. But I know that it was just terrible and how they would put a student-teacher relationship and all that. They kind of explained it better with the whole Paige and Olander thing in season 4, but I just couldn't see it. And the winner of the 7 to 12 poll, and number 7 on the list, excuse me, I have to do this right. And number 7 is Maya. And the whole Summer Girls kidnapping plot from season 14. Now, Maya had some good plots. All that, especially in season 12 when Cam offs himself in the J.T. York Memorial greenhouse and all that. And of course, they didn't want to glorify it by saying how Cam died. There were a lot of theories. Did he slash himself with a skate? Did he hang himself? Or, as I put it, did he drink garden chemicals? Although I have a funny feeling that the chemicals would definitely not be in the greenhouse because maybe they have a thing that someone would have the right idea. So, speaking from experience, knowing about garden chemicals, working in the garden center at Canadian Tire for the past 2 years, I can say that, toxicity and all that, it does make sense. So, the fact of the matter is that it's possible. I even did a Degrassi unpopular opinion on that. Was he poisoned? And people thought that I had an interesting take, which makes me smile. I have a crappy smile. But regardless of that, the whole thing with Cam and all that, and it took multiple seasons for her to get better. And start and stop. But yeah, the whole summer finale in season 14 was just stupid. I mean, the plot lines were not making sense and all that. The main storyline was that Frankie had a boyfriend who actually wanted money from her because his girlfriend Gloria got kidnapped. However, it was found to be some kind of scheme to extort money from the Hollingsworths and all that. Fortunately, no money changed hands and all that, and they got arrested. But they decided to kidnap Maya, I guess for collateral, or it was just lucky. Maya was supposed to be a lifeguard, failed her test, and then decided to be a nanny for a music producer, but actually realized that the producer should spend more time with her kids, so she tries to explain herself. She gets canned, and then, That was the job Gloria was supposed to get. So Maya got it, but then Maya gets kidnapped by Gloria and the boy. I can't remember his name. But the fact is that, how, they didn't just go to Maya's parents and say, hey, Maya's been kidnapped. What are we going to do? They didn't really go to the cops. And they used math to figure out where Maya is. That just did not make sense. It was a combination of bad logic, if you ask me. But the fact of the matter is that Maya being kidnapped and all that. And the fact of the matter is that at the time, there were rumors that Degrassi was going to end after season 14 because they did that great episode for finally tying up a little bit of loose ends. And then everyone thought that was the end of it. And then Tristan doing the vlog thing says that you think that's bad. Wait till the new class comes in. And then it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to keep Degrassi on. Well, they spin it off to Degrassi next class, and we have good storylines from there. But the fact of the matter is, Summer Girls, none of the plot lines, none of the story from that episode was ever mentioned again. No one mentioned about Maya being kidnapped and all that. No one mentioned about Frankie nearly losing money and being taken for a ride or Zoe's stuff. Yeah, they didn't mention that. All right, so now it's top 6 time for the polls and all that. So here we go. By the way, there was a tie. I'll explain that later. But the true number 6 on the list was Emma. Making the top 6 was Emma and dating Peter. Now, originally, the Spin Mason infographic said that her worst plotline was marrying a complete stranger. Okay, yeah, she marries a complete stranger, like Spinner, and it was like a random. Now, that was a bad plot line for one thing, but I used the other intonation of bad. Like, I used my intuition. What was the word I keep saying and all that? So, anyway, yeah, I used bad in a different source. And I went with dating Peter in season 5. Now, yeah, marrying Spinner was bad enough. But I mean, dating Peter, I went with my interpretation. That's it, the word. Interpretation was bad. And, being with Peter in season 5. So in season 5, I'm sorry, I'm being rudely interrupted here. Anyway, season 5, Emma wants to go after Peter and all that, saying that Peter's the first boy I've liked since Hurricane Sean blew through my emotional trailer park. So I'm guessing that she was just saying that because in season 4, Sean saves Emma from Rick's gun, and Emma wants to be with Sean, I guess Survivor's Guild or something. And then Sean decides to go to Wasaga Beach and stay there. So logically, she goes after Peter. She stumbles over her words with the Degrassi intro, welcoming Peter to Degrassi. It was kind of funny. And then Manny and Peter go to a party and all that. Manny ends up being with Peter, getting drunk. Peter gets Manny drunk, and then Manny flashes her breasts at the camera. And Peter uses it to, extort $3,000 for a new camera. But Manny won't give it to him or even date him. So Peter gives the video out to everyone in Degrassi. Emma's shocked. However, Emma is only shocked to find out that Manny was being with Peter. And Emma thinks that Manny's trying to steal Peter from under her nose because, she wants to be with Peter. But that's not the case, and Emma jumps to conclusions like normal. But the fact of the matter is, Emma finally realizes all this stuff and gives Manny a break and just, says that Peter is scum and all that. And they work together. They want to work together to destroy Peter. So Emma decides to try to reverse porn on Peter. Unfortunately, she falls in love with Peter's shirtless pics, and in her mental state being the way it is, she decides to date Peter in secret. It only gets out when Manny threatens to out Emma's eating disorder to Spike. Because, Emma has the issues eating because she's trying to help Manny lose weight for a role and all that. She took control of it. I think Manny wanted Emma to help, but Emma took control of it terribly. She also had the point about the whole Spike and Snake thing about the trees and telling Spike about the snake's trees, even though it was just an innocent kiss, as they say. But the fact of the matter is that, Emma was trying to keep the family together, and then, on top of preventing people from finding out she's dating Peter. So she basically ends up having issues. And, she finally decides to tell people about Peter. Peter even has an issue with Emma thinking that she's not eating. And then it's up to Manny, Peter, and Snake to hold an intervention for Emma. But then Emma decides to snap at all three. And then in a panic induced tantrum, she has a tantrum. She gets a panic attack, goes to the hospital, vows to get better by beating her eating disorder. But the fact of the matter is that season 6, she's with Peter, and he's accepting of that because Peter's making Emma better. But we also know that that's when Sean came back in the picture. And I think in a way, Sean was brought in to break up Emma because of all the probably early internet board hate on Peter and Emma season 5. This was 2005, mind you. So for the sake of it, but of course the Peter Emma relationship ends when Emma learns from Manny and Jay about Peter putting Sean up to something. So the fact of the matter is that, that breaks off and all that. And it's like, why would Emma date a guy who put her best friend in a bad situation? Maybe Emma, in her state of mind, was thinking that, she should be thanking Peter because now she can control Manny as much as she wants. And if Manny fights it, then Emma could kick her out. Of course, we all know that could be the truth. That might not be the truth, but yeah, that's just sickening how Emma's character had just fallen to dating a guy who put her best friend in a bad situation. That's just not right. That's not right. So anyway, number 5 on the list, and this is where the tie comes in. There was a tie for fourth, but because I didn't really like this storyline, this is number 5, and this is Ellie fangirling on Craig in the whole pick me situation. Now, Ellie had a decent relationship with Sean. I knew he was going to cough. In season 3, when they were put in detention by Raditch. Raditch put people in detention for crimes. Like, he put Ellie in there because Ellie kept missing classes. Sean because Sean badmouthed Raditch. And in a sense, he also put Sean in there because, he did steal stuff. He didn't have the physical proof, but he could kind of punish Sean in a way. He put Toby and Jimmy in because they were changing grades on a computer. And there was one more, wasn't there? Oh yeah, Hazel for looking at inappropriate sites. So yeah, so Ellie and Sean picked up a relationship from that episode, and they were good together. They lived in student housing together because Sean's brother decided to leave for Alberta. Sean wanted to stay in Ontario and finish that education. So yeah, all that. But then Ellie loses Sean after Sean decides to go to Wasaga Beach to be with his parents because of the whole psychological thing with the whole Rick situation and all that, and that he wasn't fine. So Ellie had to be in that housing unit all by herself in a way. And then her mother gets her to return home. Ellie left her mom's place because of the whole fact that her mom was an alcoholic when her dad was out being a colonel in Afghanistan. So Ellie does that. And then Ellie, for some strange reason, just wanted to find a guy. She had to fight Caitlin over Jesse. There were a few other guys she wanted to be there, but then she realizes Craig's the right person for her because Ellie and Craig actually were in the same class together for Ellie, with trying to cut herself and all that, and then trying to get better in therapy, and then Craig for his bipolar stuff. So she fangirled on him, but learned in the Degrassi Goes Hollywood movie that Craig had a girlfriend and all that. So she decides to walk into the Pacific Ocean, but thankfully Craig and Marco save her from herself. So yeah, it was just awful. Ellie had the pick me energy. Like she was this decent character, but then she just devolved. The true number 4 is Claire and her weed cult. Now I know Claire had some bad storylines too. Even the vampire fanfiction one, bleh, which was a terrible episode. But the simple fact was that, the weed cult thing, it was a culmination of things that Claire just tried to deal with. Now, the weed cult happened at a time when Claire's parents had separated, and Claire was trying to get her parents to stay together because, the Christian value of marriage instead of divorce. So Claire, was shipped around from her mom's place to her dad's place. I think, yeah, she lived with her mom because her dad didn't want Claire around because the dad was dating somebody. So she ends up being with her mom and all that. And it was okay. But then Claire likes this guy named Jake. And it's like a decent relationship. Claire and Eli just didn't work out the first time. And then all of a sudden, Claire's mom has an infatuation with Jake's dad. And they marry without giving the consideration to Claire that, Claire wanted to be with Jake. Now Claire and Jake were step siblings, and that made their relationship kind of incestuous. The fact of the matter was that Claire deserved better, and Claire was upset over the fact that her mom would marry her boyfriend's dad, meaning that she couldn't be with Jake. But she decided to keep that relationship going because she needed to cling on someone and probably to avoid Eli. So, yeah, her living situation. And then these people hear about her diatribe and ask her to come live with them. So it's kind of a weed cult thing. And it was weird how Claire, would decide to put herself in this situation, kind of a new low, if you will. But yeah, it was just terrible. Claire was not in the right frame of mind. I mean, her relationships were gone sour, her family life and all that. Like, I get it that Claire probably wanted to belong and all that. But fortunately, she got out of there somehow. And then, she starts dating Eli again. All right, so that was that. Number 3 with 11 votes in the poll was, I should do it with my right hand. Yeah, my right hand. Is Fiona and the Twincest. So Fiona was introduced in season 9 with her twin Declan as kids who were born to a diplomat in Japan. So they came from Japan to Canada because the father was a diplomat coming to Canada to be a diplomat from the States while they were American citizens. And Fiona seemed to be a decent character, but Fiona had this bond with her twin. Like, a lot of twins have inseparable bonds with each other and all that. It's kind of weird. You share a womb and you share a lot of things. One twin's left-handed, one twin's right-handed. And like, that's weird. But Fiona, I think, had distant a distaste for Holly J because of Holly J's personality and didn't want Declan dating Holly J. And fearing that Declan was going to move on from Fiona, in a sense, she decides to kiss him at a New York soiree, and it makes the rounds on the gossip pages and all that. And a lot of people were questioning Fiona's intentions. Like, I understand with Fiona because, she wanted to keep Declan in her life and didn't want Holly J to interfere because she really hated Holly J. I hate Holly J. But the fact of the matter is, it just made Fiona awkward, strange, and she tried to get a relationship with Riley and a few other guys, and then of course she was with Bobby, who is so abusive. Fiona takes to alcoholism. I think she wins her case against Bobby, but it was a hollow victory because of her alcoholism, and they made her look like a fool, and she had to get therapy for her problems. Okay, so that was that. Number 2. Okay, sorry about that. Number 2 with 14 votes in the poll was Zoe and the Degrassi nudes debacle from season 14. Now, bad plots were, it was a decent plot, but it made Zoe bad. Now, the genesis of the whole Degrassi nudes thing can go back to season 13 when Zoe gets raped by Luke Baker and his associate Neil and all that. And Becky, even though she was Luke's sister, excuse me, and wanted to bring the evidence to light and do all this. And of course, it ticked off Becky's parents because, they valued Luke a lot more than Becky. I guess because the oldest, and Luke was a hockey player who had a future and all that. And the whole Christian crap about the fact that you got to protect your brother at all costs, despite the fact that they didn't know that their son is a rapist. Becky stands up for Zoe and helps Zoe win her case against Luke and Neil, putting them in juvie for 2 years because they're not 18 and not allowed to have an adult sentence. Becky gets shunned by her family. They don't kick her out because I think if they kick her out, then they probably would have to answer some questions. So yeah, Becky feels lost and all that because everyone hates her. But the fact is that Zoe was defiled in a way, and Zoe just was trying to fix her reputation and all that. In season 14, she becomes the Power Squad captain, the cheerleading squad's captain, and to make money for new uniforms, they decide to sell provocative pictures of them online. It doesn't help that Frankie, cheerleader for Degrassi Nudes, actually gets some pictures bought by Hunter, her twin brother. Like, Hunter, that's your sister, man. Buying these photos is one thing, but why? Your sister. Doesn't make sense. So the fact of the matter is that Zoe is pushing the cheerleaders to do their part. Frankie stands up to her and says, "No, I can't do it." And so he kicks her out of the cheer squad and says, "Don't go to the cops because you're just as guilty as everyone else." So practically, it's a game between Zoe and Frankie who will play first and all the evidence and all that. And during that cheer competition at Degrassi, things come to a head. Miles unfortunately starts a fire. The cheerleaders are in a room and smoke-filled room and all that. We soon learned that Winston was trying to break Degrassi Nudes so that he could get Frankie on the cheerleading squad. And so he's upset that Winston would try to do something to win his girlfriend back by that standard. However, Lola and a few other cheerleaders tell Zoe that basically Zoe put them in this situation. She should go to the cops and all that because if you don't, you're going to lose more than freedom. You're going to lose your friends. So Zoe thinks about it, and then when everything gets cleared up, she decides to go to the cops and tell on herself and all that. The way she was pressuring these girls was bad enough, but in a sense, it just made her terrible. She could have served 5 years in jail, but her lawyer found a way to do community service so that the judge could be a little lenient on Zoe. We don't see Zoe get punished for her Degrassi Nudes situation as much as we should have liked. I mean, the cheerleaders all got detentions and everything else. And it forced Simpson out and Pill in. Now, of course, what I'm alluding to with Zoe is that Zoe was trying to gain her reputation back. She was defiled and she was raped and all that. And sometimes rape victims just try to fix their problems. It was just basically her self-confidence. And by doing the Degrassi Nude saying she felt like she was in control of her own body and her own mind again. But it just went too far and just made Zoe a terrible character. It's weird how Zoe coming out of the closet made her more likable. And the number one, which you'll see at the end of this video, with 16 votes, was Snake in the whole thing with Hatzilakos in season 5. Snake had some good storylines and all that. He was one of the OGs and dating Spike, aka Emma's mom, in season 2. Emma had her reservations about it. I mean, I don't blame Emma one bit. I mean, why would you want to have your mom date a teacher? It doesn't make sense. And how does that fix things? But the fact of the matter is that, Emma comes around at times and, allows Snake and Spike to have a relationship. They want to get married. They don't want baby Jack because, well, Spike should not have gotten pregnant. Emma tries to fix the situation by going to Snake behind Spike's back, but it backfires in a way. But fortunately for Emma, Snake and Spike decide to make things work and have a new baby in the world, baby Jack. Snake gets leukemia, fights through that in season 3, fights through the whole thing in season 4 with the Rick situation and his massive guilt. I bet you he did tell Raj these things, and Raj did not take Snake seriously. But season 5 was when Snake fell apart. Snake decides to have a midlife crisis and buys a motorcycle behind Spike's back and finds out Hatzilakos also rides a motorbike, and they bond over that. And then for some strange reason, they made Snake want to be with Hatzilakos, even though he's with Spike. And the awkward thing was that Spike is with Hatzilakos. Snake is with Hatzilakos, and Emma's with Peter because Emma and Peter's relationship is supposed to be forbidden. But then Emma finds Snake and Hatzilakos kissing, and then is conflicted to turn Snake into Spike. But Emma decides to do the right thing by telling about the relationship. Spike says the relationship is one thing, but you pressuring Emma to keep it a secret. was another thing. So yeah, so Spike kicks Snake out. Emma is worried about the family dynamic. She has to pick up the pieces and all that. Fortunately, though, Spike gets wooed back by Snake, and Emma. It was supposed to be that Emma got better, but Emma's issues were still there. Yeah, it's just weird how they made Snake into a thing with Hatzalakos and all that. That they made Hatzalakos look like a bad guy in a sense. Fortunately, things got fixed, but it could have been disastrous. And then, of course, it inadvertently led to the whole season 7 situation. I talked about it with Darcy, but from Snake's POV is that, he's at home, he tries to clear his name and all that. He is cleared to go back to school and all that, but the Lakehurst students make things terrible and all that for Snake. Emma tries to intervene. Spike tells Snake, don't let Emma take control of the situation because the last time she did that, she had an eating disorder. And it's like, what the fuck? Spike, it's not right. Like, Spike has a point in a sense, but like, dude, to blame Snake and say that, Emma's gonna have an eating disorder because of this, terrible. Like, a lot of people were mad about Spike and like, the fact that she decides to leave Snake after Snake gets drunk and doesn't do much around the house. Okay, I understand. So Spike wants to take Jack and Emma to her mom's place. Emma stays behind saying that someone has to help with the situation. I think it was just a slam at Spike for maybe the eating disorder comment or just basically trying to say she was the better woman and stick it to Spike. Probably not. But yes, Snake ended up getting better and all that. Emma stood at his side and, Emma did the right thing. But yeah, they made Snake look like a total douchebag, and that's just not right. So anyway, thanks for watching this top 12. I'm Jeff Diamond Edu.